Hi, I'm Jason Bryant from the Short-Time Wrestling Podcast and founder of the Mat Talk Podcast Network. Shows on the network are individually owned and operated, and those opinions presented and expressed may not reflect others, the sponsors, patrons, or the parent network. Find more shows about the greatest sport in the world at the Mat Talk Podcast Network at mattalkonline.com.
It's time for Inside Virginia Tech Wrestling. We'll talk all things Hokie wrestling with Coach Tony Roby and staff. Now, let's join your host, Hall of Fame wrestling writer and broadcaster, Jason Bryant.
Episode 107 of Inside Virginia Tech Wrestling. Getting back on the interview train. We hope you enjoyed the interview with Ruth Walks. She was the executive director of the Moss Arts Center, in which we saw your Hokies prevail 31-15 over the Patriots of George Mason at the Moss Arts Center duel. Today on the program, Mr. Excitement himself. Although there's some title contenders for the title of Mr. Excitement, it could be Shane Sparks from the Big Ten Network, but our guest today, Rock Harrison, has made his presence known within the sport of wrestling, and a lot of that has to do with the match we're coming up this weekend talking about NC State versus Virginia Tech. Before we get to Rock's colorful personality and his gift of gab on the broadcast mic, we're going to welcome him to the Hokie Nation for today, find out a little bit about this former Cavalier. You're probably the only Cavalier that's ever welcome on this show, Rock. So, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much. There's no love like Hokie love, and since that exciting match last year, the Hokie fans have been great to me, and I love them just as much.
Again, you were probably the only. I mean, I grew up in southeastern Virginia, and I'm well versed in the battle between Hokies and Cavaliers. Again, this is the only time that a Cavalier has probably ever been welcome on this show. Even though I will say this for your credit, as you traveled around ACC country, you would never be able to tell that you went to the University of Virginia based on how you wear the gear and you get in there and talk to coaches, and you really represent the schools you visit. So before we get to NC State, Virginia Tech, what's coming up, talk about the campus tour that you've done in the off season and what it's been like to kind of ingrain yourself and embed yourself into these programs.
Well, the goal is to do more than just a Google search or a phone call when I decided to go and visit these schools. It's to, get a feel for the coaching staff and as well as the student athletes, how they interact, what is it like in a practice, is everyone happy, is it just a sour mood? And I want to make sure that I'm prepared because preparation is everything to me, and to give the viewing audience a view that they just don't know about. And I give credit to all of the coaching staff. They were incredibly honest and open about situations that have been very good for them and tough situations. And they were taking me around a tour like I was being recruited. So it's been fair. And my job as an analyst is to be fair and to present the ACC in the best light as possible. And that's why going to the schools was something that I threw out there and said, hey, I'm doing it on my own dime just because I want to make sure I'm better and make sure that the fans have something that they can learn from.
What was your trip through Blacksburg like?
Blacksburg, they're always good to me, without a doubt. So Blacksburg, it was one of the few times I went there, and it was a good day because the times I've gone there, it's been cold or overcast, cloudy. But I went there, it was pretty awesome. And as soon as I got there, Ethan was helpful, and they took me out to their wonderful cafeteria, and I got a tour. I mean, a real tour, not just a tour, but I was in one of those go-karts or golf carts, whatever it's called. And we were driving in the middle of the street with Coach Freyer. I mean, I said, we don't have a license plate. He's like, don't worry about it. So we were around, and I saw all the campus, and it was a really nice campus because the times I've gone there, I've only gone to the Castle or just anything wrestling related. So really good. And then the most important piece was just seeing practice and seeing how the guys interact. And I tell you what, the Virginia Tech wrestlers absolutely friendly, came up to me speaking like they've known me for years, and I'm really appreciative of that. So they were great.
Now, compare and contrast, because back when you were wrestling at the University of Virginia, Virginia Tech and U.Va were not in the same conference. This was not a conference rivalry, but of course, proximity to the schools. You guys had met on the map, but what were some of your memories about competing against Virginia Tech when you were in college?
The only time that we were actually competed against Virginia Tech were either in open tournaments or they used to have a Virginia Collegiate State tournament. And those were the only times that we actually had competition. And we didn't really pay too much attention to Virginia Tech just because We weren't, rivals, so to speak, because we're in different conferences. However, football was obviously the big thing. So we didn't see them too much. We just saw them in tournaments, but it wasn't as much as a matter of fact, I don't believe that we ever scheduled a dual meet against Virginia Tech. No, we did not schedule one dual meet against Virginia Tech while I was at UVA.
Well, it's just kind of interesting now that with the, of course, football and basketball and the conference money drove the realignment train back in the 90s, and when all this came to be, and all of a sudden you had Hokies and Cavaliers really having the opportunity to now bicker multiple times a year across, no matter what sport. So from your perspective, being a wrestler, what do you think that was like to see both schools in the ACC and now true bitter rivals across every single sport?
Well, it's good from a geographic standpoint, and just the fact that, being at the largest schools in the state, and being just, the rivalry being pretty strong, it was good to see each other on a I guess, annual basis. The thing that I've noticed is that Virginia, they really want to beat Virginia Tech. So that is the goal. And Virginia Tech is like, UVA, yeah, okay, we'll beat them. So I think that Virginia Tech kind of knows that their goals are higher. Not to say that Virginia doesn't want to have higher aspirations, but they really want to beat Virginia Tech. And Virginia Tech, they just assume that it's going to be a victory. And, of course, with their performance over the past years, it seems that way.
Let's turn this back to wrestling a little bit in your background. You're a national prep runner-up back in 1993 for Gilman School in Maryland. And talk about the opportunity and how you discovered wrestling and what it was like wrestling in the preps, and then the opportunity to wrestle at the Division I level.
Well, I stumbled on wrestling and was literally stumbled across it because in elementary school, I don't know if they still do that now, but you used to go and do different sports just to get a feel. You do volleyball, you do basketball, and then I stumbled on wrestling. We had a little tournament for our grade, and I won in 4th and 5th grade, thinking I was really, really good. And then next year, a friend of mine said, "Why don't you, try and wrestle in what was called junior league, which is essentially recreation?" And then that's when it started. Had early success, and I didn't have anyone in my family that ever wrestled. It's not like we had a strong, extremely athletic family. The only time we really ran is when we were running from a dog or something. But other than that, we didn't have any feel for what wrestling was. High school had moderate success, and I had the opportunity to get recruited by UVA. And it's a funny story here. Coach Bernstein, he was at the national prep, so I just won my semifinals match, and you couldn't talk to the person. So one of the parents had to relay a message from me and so forth. And so when he called me, or I called him, I don't remember how it went down. He said, "So have you heard of UVA?" I was like, "Yeah, I have heard of UVA." He said, "Great." He said, "What do you know?" I said, "Well, I applied." He's like, "You applied?" I was like, Yeah. And then he said, "Well, what happened?" I said, "I got waitlisted." He was like, "You're in. You're good. You're great. Fine, no problem." So he was excited because I was interested in UVA. I wasn't thinking about college wrestling. I was just thinking about, academics in school. And so I was his first recruiting class. And at that point, I started. And wrestling at UVA was a different experience, completely different than it is now when you visit. And these student athletes have a lot of things that we didn't have. Or they have a dietitians, that was unheard of. Dietitians, sports psychologists, someone that actually is a person that doesn't just monitor a study hall, but you actually have a tutor, things of that nature. So it is a lot easier to be successful with academics and wrestling. However, the expectations were a lot less when I was in college as opposed to what it is right now. And that's because the ACC has gotten so good. And so I really had a positive experience everywhere I've gone, from Gilman to UVA, and obviously with the ACC Network and ESPN. Everywhere I go to, it's been very, very great.
Now, here's a weird crossover I wasn't expecting to find, and it's between both me and you, oddly. So I'm looking through your placements in 112 pounds, 1993, looking at the names. Of course, your given name is Gerard. We'll get to why you're named Rock here in a minute, but I'm looking down at 8th place, 112 pounds, guy I went to college with. How the heck? Dave Trudill McDonough School was 8th at that weight class. Yeah. I did not expect us to have that type of age crossover here. Dave was at that school in Norfolk with me, and then you were in the same weight. Wow, okay, so yeah. I'm having some flashbacks.
Dave Trudill, I remember before I wrestled my semifinal match, he wrestled that guy. And that's the only time I really had a conversation with him. I said, well, how is he? And he was like, yeah, he was all right. You'll beat him. That's the extent of our conversation. So I remember wrestling the guy in the semifinals and beating him. And it's not like Dave was helpful, but at least he gave me some confidence. But yes, Trudell and McDonough is Gilman's rival. So it was odd going to my rival school to ask for some insights. And it was, again, before everyone had a video camera and a cell phone camera. You had to ask around.
Jeez, that's the guy who lived on my hall my freshman year. Oh, my goodness, man. Haven't seen him in probably 20 years, but wow, that's a blast from the past. As we get to more blasts from the past, okay, a name like Gerard, you might expect to see at a prep school. Name like Rock, how did you develop that nickname?
It wasn't developed. It was given to me. So in second grade, actually, I started at Gilman in first grade. It was first grade, 1st through 12th. And in second grade, not just second grade, but in first grade, we had to learn how to swim. And so in first grade, I was not so good. And then second grade, I just wasn't good. And then the swim instructor said, you know what? Every time you get in the pool, you sink to the bottom of the pool like a rock. And so at that point, they're like, we're going to call you Rock. Now, it's crazy because in this era, they would say, oh, that's hurting the person's confidence and it's not endearing. It was just a nickname. It's just what it was. And it stuck with me. So pretty much through elementary school, Rock was just a name given because I was unable to swim because I wasn't very buoyant. I was lean. I was 7 years old. But, as you get older, you get a little more buoyant. I can float pretty well now. But that's where Rock came from. It's not because of wrestling, it's because of my inability to swim. And it's easy to remember. So when I introduce myself as Rock, does anyone remember Rock? Gerard? Gerald? No. It's stick to Rock. So that's how I got it from my inability to swim in second grade.
Yeah, I just didn't know if you were just a fanatic about Tim Raines, maybe, perhaps, the Major League Baseball player who went by Rock Raines. Or, of course, there's then that guy in the sports entertainment world who's the most electrifying sports entertainment. Yeah, we know who Dwayne Johnson is. Now, when it comes to
he needs to have an article before his name. The Rock. I'm just Rock. I don't need anything extra. But if I had his money, I would take anything.
I think we're all in agreement there. Now, I first discovered you, it was years ago. I was talking to Tim Foley, another former Cavalier guy I grew up with and covered in high school in Virginia. He's a couple years behind me. And this was before we had the streaming as we know it. There were webcasts, but there really wasn't, it was really early days of Flow. We didn't have conferences streaming rights everywhere. And you show up doing the ACC tournament. I think you did it with Tim. And I'm like, I remember it's like, who's this? Oh, Rock Harris. He wrestled. He wrestled U.Va. He's a reference and whatnot. So how does the broadcasting opportunities come up for you? And let's go back in time to how that one approached you, and then how you've brought that to what we have now, working with Sean Kenney on the ACC Network.
I joke with the coordinator of officials named Jim Chung. Good guy, friend for a long time. Actually, he brought me into officiating. So I was an official for many years in high school, and then I went to watch a wrestle-off at UVA, and Mike McCormick, a UVA alum, as well as a top-notch official. And so Mike was like, you ever thought about officiating? I was like, I don't know. And then he said, well, let me put you in contact with another guy in Maryland. So I started off officiating, had success, kind of fast-tracked, and then I was thrown into the collegiate world. So after my first year of officiating, they threw me into a conference, and that was the CAA. And I was just literally 2 years in, thrown to the wolves, and managed, and then moved there from the CAA to Southern Conference, then to the ACC, where full circle, Jim Chung is the coordinator of officials. I thought I had a very good tournament, and at that time, the coaches really had to say so if you were able to come back as an official. Half liked me, half didn't like me. So it was kind of like, well, do we want to put you in a bad situation? Do we want to let you sit out for a little bit? I said, Jim, whatever you say, I'm good with. So my ego was shocked because I thought I had a really good officiating tournament, but you make one bad call, and that's all the coaches remember. Nevertheless, that's when ESPN and ACC were looking for talent, quote-unquote talent. And the same person that, quote-unquote, fired me from the ACC was the one that said, look, you might be good at this because you are a former wrestler on the D1 level, and you know the ACC, and you are a former official. No one has that element of those things, and, you speak relatively well. And at that point, I said, all right, let's try it. So my first ACC tournament. I think it was 8 years ago at Pitt, and never did it before. And it was back-to-back matches because online, you just really can't get up. I didn't understand that. So I'm trying to keep my mouth wet by drinking water, but I realized I couldn't go to the bathroom. It was miserable. So finally, when they gave us a break, 4-minute break, you start to the bathroom. And so progressed there, got more and more experience. Sean Kenney's been fantastic, taught me a lot in the sense of being yourself, being authentic, not trying to yell at everybody. You got to bring the moment when the moment is there and make sure you let the moment breathe, because sometimes we want to talk over a moment or let something develop. Those are things that he did, and another guy named John Stoss at ESPN would just bring me along. And the more you do something, you get better and better. And when the ACC decided to launch the ACC Network, Brandon Neff decided to really push to have something called Friday Night Duels. And known Brandon Neff since the days of the Southern Conference. And that's when Brandon said, we're going to try this out. And that's when my name got put in there, and I reached out, and they said, sure, why don't you be the one? And that's how it started, and I guess the rest is history.
Yeah. Going back to last year, though, because we didn't know what the season was going to bring with COVID and whatnot. And yeah, I remember, I think I was sitting here in my office, and I remember watching ESPN do Korean baseball. And I'm like, these guys are doing this from their office, their study, their living. I was like, what in the world is going on with this? Little did we all know that was going to be the norm for a while. I mean, we've got people, creating. I actually was fortunate enough to create my studio prior to the pandemic. So when I've had to do voiceovers for stuff, I was set. But at the same point, you're not a broadcaster by trade. So when all these opportunities start coming, it's like, how do you get the equipment? What's the conversation like? Okay, we're still going to have wrestling. What? We're not going to have any fans. What? We're going to do this. We're not going to be there. How does all this unfold for you and Sean?
It's still in motion as we speak, but the way it worked out, and we were very, very fortunate that we had just remodeled our basement just because it was time to get it done. And at that point, that's when COVID really, was hitting hard. And they came up with the concept of doing the at-home talent. And they, meaning ESPN, they sent all of the equipment, and they mailed it to my home. This big yellow box is huge. And so they walked me through the Zoom on how to plug in this and where to put this. And that was how it started. And one of the biggest challenges is that in your home studio, it's kind of quiet. So you can't feel if the crowd is getting into it. You don't get to see everything, but you start to navigate a little more. So I prefer being right on site. It's just better to see, what the coaches are doing, to see what the official is doing, because you can't see all stall calls from the camera angles. I prefer being there just to feed off the energy of the wrestlers, the coaches, and of course the fans. So when I go and do it at home, I get why ESPN is doing it. It's being precautionary. I get it. It's also less costly with the travel to send this out there, and because they invested so much money into it, it might be something that sticks around for a while. However, I begged and I pleaded that they send this to Raleigh for Virginia Tech at NC State, because I can't call another match like that from my basement if I want to stay married.
I don't think a lot of us can watch a match like that in our basement and still stay married. I remember watching it last year. I'm like, man, Rocky's going. It's just like I'm saying that became a very viral moment in the true term. It wasn't created to try to go viral. That was a genuine feeling, and the reactions were really across the board. Some people are like, this is amazing, and then some people are like, what's this guy doing? So obviously caught up in the moment, emotion being what it was, the late takedown, the near fall, the decision on criteria, that was all a year ago, and all of a sudden here comes the myth that is Rock Harrison. So take us through that moment and why you felt you reacted the way you did in the final closing moments of that just iconic dual meet in the ACC.
One of the things that I've noticed about some people, and you can kind of tell when someone's authentic and when someone is not authentic. And my goal is always to remain authentic and to get better each day. That means that I'm a fan. I'm a fan of wrestling. If I wasn't in front of that screen with my headsets, I'd be doing the same thing. I want to portray what we're seeing to the people at home that may not be seeing it or may not be able to feel the vibe. So as I'm watching the match, I'm not watching it from the lens as an analyst. I'm watching it from the lens as a fan of what's happening. And so as I'm watching it, I'm getting excited, and I wanted to be authentic, but I'm not thinking of being authentic. It's just what's happening, and I'm talking through it. Everything that I did is what I would have been doing without a headset on, just all those motions. And it came through, and I think that's what made it a special moment because of not just me, but of the wrestlers. You know, there were just 10 matches that were going back and forth, and Sam Latona, Jacob Camacho, they were going at it. So it's not me. It's just me watching and calling what I see. And the credit goes to the student athletes. It goes to them. If they don't go all out, if they don't wrestle, if they don't get to a point where Connor Brady didn't get majored by Hayden Hidley to keep the match within, striking distance, little things like that just build it up. And we just don't know what's going to happen when we say every point makes a difference. So as it got to that point, I just talked about it as any regular fan would do. And that's why it made it exciting, because this is me being me, but it's not me. It's me representing the wrestling world, because that's what wrestlers do. If you, and just you've seen thousands and thousands of matches, but you see when coaches lean, they're leaning with a shot, or, they pop their hips in or come out of their chair. We all do that. So why, as an analyst, why should I do something different? Why should I put myself in a box? People want to see someone that's authentic and someone that tells the truth. And that's why that moment was pretty special. But give credit to the student athletes. Those are the ones that made the moment, not me.
And we look at that happened with ACC teams. Granted, the Big Ten Network does a great job at showcasing wrestling. They've got a great broadcast crews, plural. And then, but it was an ACC thing. It happened, people watching on the ESPN Plus app, people watching on ESPN app, people watching on ACC Network. It was the fact that it was 15 years ago. We're not talking about Virginia Tech and NC State. It could have been the greatest duel in the world. Nobody's there. It's definitely not streaming. It's not on TV, and they're definitely not staffing it with high quality broadcasting either. So to see the ACC kind of be kind of the lightning rod for something that wild and that viral was probably a plus for pretty much everybody involved there.
I have to agree. It was good for wrestling, because friends of mine that don't know anything about wrestling said, I watched it, what was going on, but it was exciting. I can't tell you what happened, but it was exciting. And as an analyst and as play-by-play with Sean Kenney, our goal is really three types of people that we're reaching out to. One is the hardcore wrestling fan, the ones that will watch the Worlds at 2 a.m. They'll find wrestling no matter where it is at what time. You got to respect them, and you got to talk to their level to make sure that you know the nuances of a move or something that they don't know, because you want them to respect you. The second one is a person that may have wrestled in high school, maybe JV, and they understand conceptually what wrestling is, but they don't realize it's 3 minutes for the first period in college or what riding time is, but they understand the concepts. So they need to be educated, but a little more than someone that doesn't know anything about wrestling. And that's the last person. I'm trying to reach the person that was watching basketball, go into the other room, and come back into the room and say, what is this? What's going on? What is this leotard that they're wearing? No, it's not a leotard, but what are they doing? I want to reach them, because that's the movable number. Those are the people that will really grow the sport. They have no idea what it is. And the next time they might say, you know what? Hey, let's watch this again. So I need to be able to explain to the high-level fans, like the Virginia Tech fans, but then someone that doesn't know anything from what shoelaces are to what a headgear is. But I got to move that needle. So a lot of times people give me grief, like, you kind of explain a little too much. Yeah, that's because I'm trying to reach out to those fans that may not understand it. And I give credit to the ACC Network and ESPN, because last year the Virginia Tech NC State match was not on the schedule. And I was like, fellas, what are you doing? We got to do this. And I said, well, I don't know. And so they made it an accommodation to make it a doubleheader. There was a match at 6 o'clock with Duke versus Virginia, and then they put us on later on. So they're getting it. They're getting it that wrestling is important, and they are humble enough to say, please let us know what we should broadcast. So I'm trying my best, fans, to get as much as possible next year, trying to get some out-of-conference matches on the ACC Network. We just need to have guys perform on a national level, so when we go to program and say, look, you're going to get some viewership.
When it comes to preparation, so we have to roll this back a little bit. What is Rock Harrison's day job?
Being a husband and a father, so that's what I do, sun up to sundown. But to make money, we have a firm that we do investment and insurance planning for individuals. It's 10 of us, and been doing this for almost 20 years. So that's how I make money, and it allows me the opportunity to talk a lot about wrestling, because everybody in our office did some type of wrestling on some level, and we talk about it. And I'm able to go and travel because I don't have a schedule. I kind of just make my own schedule. And that's what I do from sun up to sundown. But as for preparation, one thing I do unequivocally challenging, but every week I read the rule book. And it's very challenging, not because of reading, but you kind of get accustomed, like, I know this. No. I read the rule book every single week because I don't want to be in a position where I don't know a situation. I don't care how random it is. And that's something that the hardcore wrestling fans, they think they know everything. But when you bring out something, well, what happens on a second injury call at the end of the second period? Something like that. Okay. And when you bring that to their life, they respect you a little more. So I read the rule book every single week. After that, I do, we have our coaches' calls to talk about the wrestlers. And then I watch film. There's guys like, Mackay and Hayden or Trent Hidley or Hunter Bolin. I've seen them enough, so I don't have to really watch them. But I'm trying to watch like Clayton to see what else does he do besides the left side high C. What is he moving towards? Those things. So I watch probably a good 15 hours of film per week, and it seems like overkill. But I want to be prepared because the fans deserve it. They deserve it. So I may over prepare, but I just want to make sure that the fans get the best. And if it takes more time out of my week, it's only during the wrestling season.
What about developing a rapport? Because I've known Sean Kenney for a number of years. Haven't actually worked with him directly in a broadcast situation, but I've been with him at World Championships and such, and seen him at championships around the country. Knowing how he prepares, knowing how his demeanor is away from the microphone, what's it been like to kind of work with him? And this is a guy who works full-time in radio, but you see him with college football. Him and Shane Sparks worked a game together, which was pretty awesome from a wrestling perspective this year, to see two of your wrestling buddies sitting there calling a football game on Fox. But when it comes to knowing how to build that, okay, when is he going to bring this to me? When am I going to pitch back to him? When do I know when to lay out? Let Sean call the action, down distance, that kind of thing, like Jim Gibbons likes to say. So, how long did it take to kind of really develop that synergy with your play-by-play guy?
It's still developing, and not saying we aren't very good, but we're still making sure that we know each other well. And we've gotten to the point where we know each other. For example, Sean, when we were doing an at-home talent, he could kind of read the screen to see how I was reacting, to know I got to let Rock get in, because I'll start moving around and he knows, okay, let me just fade out. But what makes Sean so good as a play-by-play is that he knows his role. His role is to lay and set up the table and let the analysts, do what they do, and let the athletes do what they do. He doesn't try to overwhelm the audience with too much facts. He doesn't want to show that he knows everything. He knows that he is just to set the table for the athletes or the analysts to break down. And because of that, he's so good at what he does. And that's why he can do many things well. But along the way, Sean and I, we talk. We talk and we throw ideas out there, and we respect each other's opinion. There's some people in every line of work, not wrestling, not just for football or anything, but every line of work, they're pretentious people. And he is not pretentious at all. And I hope I'm not a pretentious person, and we get along well. And the production staff at each of these schools, they do a good job. And we're very gracious, everyone that helped out. It's not about the analysts, or they may get a lot of the attention, but a lot of things happen behind the scenes, as you know, Jason, that a lot of things happen behind the scene that we just aren't privy to. So just being gracious and really not pretentious in everything that you do. And Sean is that guy. So we try our best, but we realize it is about the student athletes and making sure that the viewers have a very good experience and hopefully grow the sport.
Looking at this Friday's duel, we're talking Friday night duels. We've got number 5 NC State, number 7 Virginia Tech. The Hokies have moved up this week because Arizona State had a little slip when they went out to Pitt and Princeton. Granted, their lineup being what it was led to some losses, but two teams in the top 7. I think Hokie fans and Wolfpack fans have had it circled. Wrestling fans should have had this circled on their calendar. It's a little earlier in the schedule this year, but rather than go match by match, I know there's a couple things that are going to be keys here, and I'm looking at it going, there's probably 7, no less than 7 toss-up matches here that, depending on what your favored colors are, you can say, oh, we're favored here. Well, they're favored here. There's matchup on matchup, but it's not just the Mackay Lewis Hayden Hidley match. I mean, we're talking all these weights. What are the three weights you're going to probably be looking at the most to determine the winner of this dual meet?
You are right about the toss-ups. I said 8. 7-8, that's fine. And one of the things about toss-ups, it could look like a blowout if you just look at the score because someone won the toss-ups. But if you look at the box score, you'll say, wow, that was a 3-2, that was 5-4, that was 6-5. And all the matches can go all one way, which means it looks like a lopsided score. I'm hopeful that it goes back and forth, but we just don't know. That's why you watch the match, because the final score may not be indicative of what actually happened. But when it comes down to the matches, and I've done this since probably August of last year, trying to figure out what's going to happen. I'm interested in, of course, Mackay and Hayden. I mean, that's just something that's just exciting. These guys are just different. The other match that's going to be fireworks is Tariq Wilson and Bryce Andonian. These guys, I mean, Tariq Wilson just wins. He just wins. Every time you turn around, he's winning. And Bryce Andonian, he is made for television. He makes my job easy because he is going to wrestle hard. And the third sneaky good match, Jason, is at 157. Ed Scott and Connor Brady. That match is going to be sneaky good. Connor Brady has gotten better. And I think the turnaround was his match last year against Hayden Hidley, where he kept it to a regular decision. You say he still got beat by 7, but he closed the gap, and he's gotten so much better. And Ed Scott's been on fire. He'll throw a headlock from anywhere. So these guys at 157, I think that's the sneaky good match. But if you're talking 3 matches, Hayden Hidley, Mackay Lewis, Bryce Andonian, and Tariq Wilson, and then Connor Brady versus Ed Scott. Those are the 3 matches that I'm most interested in. But as I said before, there are a lot of other great matches as well.
Yeah, and we look at the way duels are. Sometimes it's not the 1 and 2 or 2 and 3, whichever rankings you're looking at when it comes to Hidley and Lewis. But I'm looking at 165 pounds. We got Clayton Ulry and Thomas Bullard slotted here based on WrestleStat, for example. We're like, that's a match that nobody's going to be talking about, but that could be the one that ultimately wins the duel for either team.
No doubt. And here's the thing. Clayton Ulry, we know he's going to hit his high crotch. His high crotch maybe not as good, but will be as good as Ty Walls was when his high C at heavyweight. His high C is really good. But the challenge when you wrestle Bullard is that he's very good once someone gets to his leg. And he has to finish, Clayton has to finish very quickly because Bullard is going to tie you up. And Bullard's best position is top. Always worst position is bottom. Are they going to go underneath? I don't know. But Clayton Ulry has to figure out if he does get taken down or if he in a position where Bullard takes top, he has to be able to get out of bottom. He can't just roll around because sometimes he has the propensity to roll around a lot. But if you do that against Bullard, who just makes his money off the top, it could be a bad situation. He has to stay disciplined and finish his high C's quickly.
When we move to the next part of the season, because there's so much on the line here, but as far as the duel goes, we've still got the ACC tournament coming up. We've got the rest of the dual meet schedule. So how do you kind of mentally prepare yourself for this stretch run of the season where you've got your Friday night duels, then, get ready for the postseason?
I get ready because I've been ready since August, just ready to do this. This is something that I enjoy to do. This isn't a job per se. This is a pleasure. So the fact that I get to call and watch the best wrestling in the nation, on a weekly basis is exciting to me. But as soon as one match is over, probably all of Friday and Saturday, I'll be thinking about it. And then Monday, you'll start to think about what's coming up next after you look at the box scores and what else happened across the country. So I find it a joy because I enjoy watching wrestling. Even if I wasn't calling matches, I'd be watching it. I'll be reading about it. I'll be reading different pieces from different perspectives. So I don't really consider it preparation. I consider it just a joy to do what I do. And my goal is to make sure that we grow the sport and make sure people enjoy it. If they can't be there, can Sean and I portray the atmosphere? Can we really break down what's happening so that people are engaged and say, I want to keep watching this? And I know that we're going to be in a tough battle with Michigan versus Penn State. But hopefully we'll have some people that will watch us in video or tape the Michigan and Penn State match.
All right, Rock, and going into this postseason, this is kind of like a rookie year for you all over again because, some fans knew this, but you had a pretty tough bout of COVID that limited you. You pretty much almost shoved you to the Big 12 and then did shelf you for the NCAA championship. So how have you recovered from that? And how are you looking at this postseason as kind of another chance to say, all right, I get a do-over?
First of all, thank you for asking. COVID was a blessing and a curse for me. The curse is after the ACC tournament last year, I just wasn't feeling good that week, but I took a COVID test the week before and it came back negative. So I said, okay, I don't know what's going on. Maybe I had the flu since it is, after all, February. So I found out that I had COVID right before the Big 12 championships. And so I figured it's going to be a cold, I'll shake it off. But, I realized that I just wasn't feeling the same. I missed one of the coaches' calls, which is not likely because I was tired and slept through it. And then when I did my Big 12 championships, or I was doing the Big 12 championships, doing the pregame and right before the practice, I just wasn't really able to remember things. But being a wrestler, you just push through stuff yourself. You just push through it. Just go, push. And so I got through it. And every time I speak to someone in the Big 12, I just want to apologize because I was horrible. There's no doubt about it. I was bad. I was not good in calling. I didn't have any fire, didn't have any spunk. It just was a bad situation. And after that, I went up from the basement and crashed on my couch. And the next day, it got really, really bad. And at that point, that's when I went to the ER. And I didn't go. My brother had to literally walk me to the car to get to the ER. And they said, yes, you have COVID. And it got bad. Liver functions were acting crazy, white blood cells out of control. So I ended up being in a hospital for 12 days, got transferred to University of Maryland Medical Center, and I was on a ventilator for 3 days. And during that time in a ventilator, I did not have any idea of, what was going on. And so when I came out of the ventilator, I had my lip was really, 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 really big. And I didn't understand what had happened. And they said because the ventilator was in my mouth, I had to stay 8 hours on one side of my body, 16 on the other side of the body, and it slowly split my lip open. And it was healing to heal it back together. So every time I speak, I have a scar. No one can really see it, but I feel it when I speak. And it's just a reminder of just the goodness of the Lord every time I speak to bring me through. So I was supposed to do the NCAAs that year. They wanted me to be on the broadcast and be on the mic. And I couldn't get there. And again, coming from a ventilator, I wasn't aware of what's going on. So I'm calling the producer saying, I'm so sorry, I can't make it. Not knowing that he had talked to my wife, and my wife would talk to them what's going on. I just was out of it. And so I was not able to make the NCAAs. And so just like many of the wrestlers understand that you have to really be grateful for opportunities. And the opportunity to do the Nationals wasn't there for me last year. I'm glad to be alive. But this year, ESPN has given me, indication that things looking well for Nationals. But the bottom line is that I was really close to checking out. I was really, really close to checking out. But from my hospital bed, I did watch wrestling. I was watching, and I was cheering as best I can for just good matches. I didn't have a dog in the race, but I was just cheering for, just good wrestling. So I'm just grateful for this opportunity just to do something that I love to do, and I want to make sure that I do my best, and knowing that at any moment these opportunities can really get taken away from you. I still get emotional about it because I didn't realize how bad I was until they explained to me, that they didn't think I was going to make it. But when you go on a ventilator, it's usually not a good sign. But the Lord was gracious, and I was able to get through it. And the NC State and Virginia Tech coaches were awesome. Virginia Tech Coach Roby, he reached out to me, left a message for me. He said, Rock, this is right before the NCAAs where, stress level and worried about his team being, he still reached out to me. He said, Rock, we're praying for you, buddy. We're thinking about you, we want you to hang in there. And I'm a Cavalier. And this tells you how good of a guy Coach Roby is. Really good guy. And I know Virginia Tech may not like this, but NC State, they sent a card to me, and everybody on the team signed their card and mailed it to me. Jason, I boo-hooed like I was a baby, boo-hooed, because these guys don't owe anything to me. I'm just an analyst. But the fact that they thought I was part of the team and Coach Roby reaching out and then NC State signing the card, I love the ACC. I love the ACC because they're not just great wrestlers, but on an individual basis, they're just fantastic.
Rock Harrison, giving us some great backstory on himself and this rivalry and the broadcast rivalry and the friendships that come along with these rivalries, all in one fell swoop here on Inside Virginia Tech Wrestling. You can follow Rock on Twitter at RockReacts. That's RockReax. Hokies, Pack, Friday, January 21st, number 5 versus number 7, 7 p.m. Eastern, ACC Network. That's where you're going to find Rock. That's where you're going to find Sean Kenney. That is where you're going to find some awesome wrestling action. Rock, it's been a pleasure to hear some backstory, how you got into this broadcasting world, and glad that you're back to 100%.
I appreciate that. And Jason, the wrestling world doesn't know how much you do, but I just want to let you know that we appreciate all the work you do for the sport. You do such a good job, and I've been following you for many years before broadcasting, and I appreciate it. And on behalf of the wrestling world, thank you so much. You do a great, great job. Thank you.
Likewise. We'll see you down the line, man.
Yep.
Hokie fans, listen to Inside Virginia Tech Wrestling anywhere you go by subscribing on Apple Podcasts, but also on your favorite podcatcher of choice through Stitcher, Spotify, Spreaker, and more. Everything you need to know and how to listen at InsideVirginiaTechWrestling.com.
This show is part of the Matt Talk Podcast Network. For more wrestling podcasts, head over to MattTalkOnline.com.